Well, thank you for joining me today. My name is Nick Lynch. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Kaleidoscope, and today we're going to review, nonprofit influencer marketing, and what we've done and how we can help really provide structure on what this actually means in the nonprofit space. How to leverage influencer marketing to generate impact and to essentially to grow your mission. And so, really, the areas that we're going to cover today are sort of starting from the top, like what our impact philosophy has been and what we believe to be sort of a great place to start from. And then kind of dive into the more tactical pieces around influencer marketing. What is influencer marketing? How to use it? What are the goals that you should be setting? How do you find influencers? How do you actually get a campaign set up and out the door? And then once you have done an influencer campaign, how do you actually make more of that? How do you scale that? So that's what we're going to cover today. But to give you some context to who I am and who Kaleidoscope is, I, for the last, better part of 15 some odd years, have been really focused in building advertising technology. I'm an ad tech nerd, helping brands better target their audiences on digital and social media. But from a personal standpoint, I'm a cancer survivor. I'm a Make-A-Wish kid. I've been a part of, obviously, their family since they sent me to Disneyland, but very, very focused in supporting them locally for almost a decade here in Los Angeles, and many other nonprofits. And so I understand the multifaceted areas of being a recipient of a nonprofit, seeing behind the scenes of how nonprofits work, and obviously also understanding how to build and scale, $1 million and $1 billion brands. So that's really what Kaleidoscope is built. That's what our structure comes from, is really using that learned experience professionally and personally to build out our tools and solutions for the nonprofit space, and really helping to grow impact across the board for every mission-driven organization. So just for context of who I am and who we are. And so that all of that has really informed what our impact philosophy is at Kaleidoscope, and what we believe everything should start from is that as a mission-driven organization, you have to be really, really great and amazing at storytelling, who you are, why you're doing it, what are the key elements of your mission, and what are the humanization, or what are the things that are tangible, so that people can understand exactly who you are and what you're doing. And then if you're really good at that, you can leverage that then to build your community, identify people and companies and partners that align with your visions and your values that can really help you grow your impact, scale your mission. I know this is, people talk about this all the time. And I think it gets overlooked as the two basic components of building and growing your impact organization, because we get bogged down in the tactical pieces of running a day-to-day nonprofit. But it is where we always start when we're building a strategy around marketing, and particularly influencer marketing. And why that's important for influencer marketing is because arguably there is no better way or no better means of storytelling and community building today than influencer marketing. Influencers have a tremendous platform now across the world to be able to communicate and tell stories. It's why they are who they are. They are content creators. They're building stories on a regular basis and communicating to their audience about a particular interest for them. I think in the early days of influencer marketing, people always thought about like a Kim Kardashian, right? Or a Kendall Jenner. I guess that whole family is sort of like the marquee, like poster family for influencers. And they very much are influential. But, the influencer marketing space is, almost a decade old, I think somewhat a little bit longer than that, and is very mature. And there are influencers across the board, from small ones to large ones, and they all do different things. But essentially anybody can be an influencer as long as you have access to a platform on social media. You can be an influencer. I have a small audience on social media that follow me, that know I'm a big science fiction nerd, and that if I were to go see the latest Avatar movie and tell everybody else that it wasn't good and not to go, I may have some influence in the people that follow me. They may eventually go, but ultimately I may have some sway or influence. Same if I were to recommend a book or recommend another movie, right? And so I think it's really important to understand that everybody is a content creator who has access to social media, and everybody can be influential. And so this idea of influencer marketing and this creator economy, it is a very, very real thing. It's not just people dancing to and lip syncing to music. There are 50 million content creators in the world contributing to this space. And in the United States alone, almost a third of children in the United States list being a YouTuber or a video blogger or a vlogger as a career that they're going to do when they grow up. So it's a very real thing. And it's, over $100 billion market in this global economy. So I think that, again, influencer marketing can mean a lot of things, but ultimately we are in this now space where it is a real thing, a real career, and a really an amazing way to connect to people all over the world and to communicate in new and important ways. And so when you look at the influencer marketing space, there's a lot of nomenclature and a lot of terminology that people throw around all the time. I think maybe you guys have heard, nano or micro or macro. There's a lot of these sort of terms that get thrown around, but ultimately the way that people sort of bucketize or group influencers together so that they can understand sort of the size or the level or amount of following each influencer has is typically in sort of one of these 6 buckets. And again, depending on who you talk to, maybe they'll name it slightly different, but ultimately the industry typically thinks of influencers that have anywhere, under 10,000 followers to be a nano influencer. Anybody that has, about anywhere from, that should be 100 to 1,000 is a nano influencer. A micro influencer is 1 to 10,000. A mid-tier influencer where they're starting to see scale is about 50 to 500,000 followers. And then it goes on and on from there, right? So I think when we think about who we're trying to talk to, and we'll talk about some of the processes in a moment, but when you hear these names coming out, it's really about how big they are as an influencer, what is the size of influence that they have in the space. And so thinking about the fact that influencer marketing is here, it's real, it's a very, very successful marketing and media channel with varied and diverse groups of people and following. How do we use it to be successful in our mission? And so it starts with what we believe to be 4 core campaign components: setting your goals, building content planning, selecting an influencer, then ultimately measuring success. And so with these 4 components, this is really the formula for how you build a structured and scalable influencer marketing practice within your organization. And so at the very front, I think a lot of the times influencer marketing, even to this day, it doesn't matter if you're a nonprofit or a for-profit, there's a lot of misconception about how to use it, when to use it, why to use it. People sometimes think, well, if I can give a product to a really big influencer, they're just going to be really successful. And so for us, and the way we find success is that when you start with setting a goal, there are 3 core areas that you want to make sure that you're measuring and validating the success of your campaign. And that can be in the awareness bucket, which essentially is trying to get just people to know who you are, people to see your brand and initiatives that you're running. So that's like the awareness bucket. The second piece is engagement. You want people to like a post, follow you on social media, click on a link to go see something else, engage with your content, and be active with the messaging that is in front of them. So on the engagement side. And obviously the third piece is sales or donations. It could be, sales, raffle tickets to a gala. It could be donations for a particular awareness day or month. It could be purchases of a shirt or merchandise, maybe with a corporate partner, which we'll talk about in a second. But that's sort of the third bucket that we look at when we're trying to figure out what is it that we want to achieve when we're leveraging influencer marketing as a marketing channel. And then once you have identified which type of goal that you're going to go after, then you start assigning or trying to identify what those KPIs or those key performance indicators are that you'll be using. So in sharing and setting your goals from an awareness and engagement and a cost or sales perspective, these are the sort of key KPIs or the key performance indicators that we start to allocate to validate success. So for an awareness campaign, you want to make sure that you're measuring things like reach or impressions. So reach is like how many people have actually seen your post or that that campaign. Impressions are how many times somebody has seen that, right? So looking at those metrics are super important when building an awareness campaign. If you're building an engagement campaign, like again, you want people to like or follow you, looking at how many people have followed your account on social media since you've launched the campaign, how many people have engaged with content or posts on your social media account, how many actions did they take, those types of things that are super important. Clicks onto your website or traffic to your website are also important things. And then the third piece in terms of setting goals are the key parts in terms of sales or donations, right? So that's pretty straightforward. You know, how many people have made a sale, how many people have donated, those sorts of things. So making sure that you're identifying the metrics that you're going to use is based on your ultimate goals are super important to make sure and to validate the success of those campaigns. So from there, it's about content planning. So once you've identified what you're trying to achieve, what your goals are, and the metrics that you're going to use to validate those goals, then it's really about content planning, thinking really thoroughly about what's the concept or idea? What are we going to be promoting here? Is it a program? Is it an initiative? Is it awareness? You know, what exactly it is that we're going to be doing here? What's the kind of messaging that we want to share and what we want to deliver? What are the key sort of points around that? What type of format? Is it just images? Do we want somebody to do video? Do we want video and images, right? Is it a long video? Is it a short video? Thinking through kind of those particulars. And then the tonality. So, you know, a lot of the time we work with influencers and we rely on them to sort of make sure that they're using their authentic voice and their authenticity around how they deliver messaging. Though sometimes you want your brand voice or your organization's voice to also be integrated into how that works. And by voice, I just mean sort of some of the terms that you guys maybe use or some of the ways that you communicate or position certain ideas. You may want to make sure that that's communicated really clearly so that the influencer can do it. But these are the sort of aspects of content planning and really thinking through what are the steps that are going to be taken to actually execute this campaign with an influencer. And then once you've sort of identified those pieces, you can really start kind of thinking about how you actually want to be working with influencers, right? So there's a couple types of collaboration opportunities with influencers. You can do an ongoing ambassadorship, right? Where they're sort of like a spokesperson for you or super aligned with your vision and values and your mission. And so there may be an ongoing opportunity for long-term engagement to really build out them as a strong leading front-facing voice for what you're doing. So that might be an ongoing ambassadorship opportunity. It might just be as simple as integrating content. So maybe you know, you're using multiple influencers to integrate ideas or concepts or values of your mission, and they're building content around that and they're distributing it that way. That's somewhat similar to sponsored content where you'll be paying for them to create multiple pieces of assets. Maybe you want them to create multiple versions of videos or multiple versions of content and images that you can also use for your own marketing and other channels. And then the fourth way is like event coverage. So maybe they're live streaming or they're doing some type of coverage of your gala or some other type of event too, right? So those are sort of typically the four ways that we see influencers creating content or collaborating in building out what you're trying to achieve. And then, you know, really thinking through from there, the kind of influencer that you're looking to work with and really starting to think through, okay, if I have my goals and I know what kind of content that I want to create and I know how I want that content to be utilized, you can start thinking about refining that a little bit more around selecting the types of influencers. So I think what makes it really important when working and selecting influencers is thinking through, do you want people who just have a large reach and that they may not necessarily have direct relationship with your cause, but they have a massive megaphone and a huge influence, and you just want somebody to really help you drive reach and awareness? Or do you want somebody that's a little bit more niche, that maybe is directly connected or has been affected in some way by an issue or a cause that your nonprofit covers? Again, I would be a good example. I'm a Make-A-Wish kid. I could be an influencer for Make-A-Wish, and I could be that niche influencer that is really integrated and connected with the mission, right? So thinking through the kind of influencer you want to work with. Relevance is also obviously really key. We typically really lean towards influencers that really closely or somewhat like let no more than 2 degrees of separation to the cause that they're going to be promoting. One of the main reasons is because it just doesn't necessarily feel authentic if there isn't that closeness to the cause. But also, if an audience of an influencer has never heard or seen or has never had the influencer talk remotely about the organization or just the cause in general, then the performance of that campaign probably won't necessarily perform really well. So thinking about relevance is super key and a really important fact. Do you want to look for influencers that have high engagement rate, right? So maybe if the goal is to really get people to click on a link, follow you on social media, really engage with who you are, maybe really focus on influencers that have really high engagement, that have a really, audience that is super leaning in with their content and is engaging. Or maybe you want to work with an influencer that has really, really great content, like high quality, high visuals that you want to, make sure that they, continually use that aesthetic to create your content with you. But obviously also key important piece is the red flags, right? I think that a big misconception is that, influencer marketing is somewhat risky because they could say anything and do anything. And we've seen instances, obviously, where that has happened. However, all it takes is really just a little bit of research to really understand where an influencer sits on certain positions. You can look a little bit at their content, and the space, again, is so mature that risk is really mitigated. But still, you want to do your due diligence to make sure that maybe they haven't said anything in the past around particularly sensitive topics that may or may not be within your brand voice and your brand mission. And so once you have set your goals, identified the metrics, and started to really figure out what your content looks like, and think through the kinds of influencers that you want to look for, the last piece here is really thinking about what you want delivered, right? So how much pieces of that type of content do you want? How many changes are you hoping to get? How long do you want to be able to use the content that these influencers are using? And have you communicated with them, or have you developed what are some specific guidelines, what we call our do's and don'ts? So do say this, don't say that, those types of things. So like really thinking through the campaign setup, these are sort of the last pieces that you want to think through. And then, fully looking at when it comes time to campaign execution is really thinking through how are we going to distribute it, right? So is this going to be a campaign where the content is going to be distributed by the influencer channels and your channels? Are they just going to distribute it? How is that content going to be sent out? Is it going to be amplified through influencer marketing can be paid as well, so you can boost these campaigns on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok to make sure that they can go out to a wider audience. And are you going to work with the influencer to build bigger strategy around how that content can be used? Obviously, if you've put the plan together with all of the details that we've outlined here, most of what they'll be following is your guidance. But obviously influencers know their platform and their audience best. And so maybe you can work with them on a long-term strategy for how that content can be used and how it could be leveraged with their audience to see more engagement or whatever the main KPI or goal is for that, right? And so that's really the last piece in setting up the campaign. Obviously, finding the influencers is a key part. The best and the easiest way to find influencers once all the campaign is set up is really think through some of the key phrases, keywords, key terms that reflect your mission, right? If you're an environmental nonprofit, it's sustainability or the circular economy, right? There are keywords in everybody's mission that you could search for on any platform and come up with the results of influencers that have said those keywords, that maybe have them in their description or their bio. And then you can also, sort of sort by top accounts and those sorts of things. But that's one of the easiest ways, is once you've sort of built this, campaign setup and really clearly articulate what you want to do, then it's simple enough to start doing some simple searching and some outreach. I will tell you that the reason why all of this is so important, and why I emphasize this almost more than outreach and finding influencers, is because influencers get, direct messages all the time about asking for free things, right? Can you post this for me, or can you do this? And it's ignored 9 times out of 10. But if you can articulate who you are, the campaign that you're trying to accomplish, why you think that they would be important for that, how you see them fitting and adding value, and being really specific about those parts. And after have gone through this process, you should be able to do that. They are more likely to respond to you, to want to work with you, maybe even donate a post, right? Because you've come at them in a much more strategic way than just asking like, hey, can you do a post for me, right? Which is what everybody does. So these steps that I've outlined are super important. And are arguably more important than outreach and finding, because if you don't have these details somewhat locked in, or at least in an area that you can somewhat communicate them to a potential partner or influencer, then the likelihood of you working with them is pretty low. So once you've got your campaign details set up, you've done some outreach, you have some influencers, you have them set up, then it's really all about measuring the success of your campaigns. And so again, really making sure that if we've identified the key performance indicators or the KPIs that align with your overarching goals, again, we want to make sure that we're measuring all of those pieces, right? So we're looking at reach and impressions for our awareness bucket. We're looking at engagements and clicks in our engagement bucket, or we're looking at conversion rate for things like donations and sales and those sorts of pieces, right? And so the best thing that you can do is, once you've identified what those metrics are, try to start building systems or leveraging things like, click tracking links to make sure that you can identify which influencers are driving clicks or which influencers are driving traffic. There are some very basic tools that are free out there that you can use to create things like click tracking links, or links that will help identify where a particular user comes to your website. And then conversion rate is kind of a lot of times just simple math. How many people came to your website and how many people made a purchase? And you can start to kind of use that conversion rate. But these are the really important to make sure that you at least have some basic level of measurement systems set up, so that, again, you can make sure and validate that what you did either achieved or met goals or didn't, but really understand how and where the shortcomings were or where the successful things were. Because essentially, ultimately, the goal is testing these things out, seeing what worked and what didn't, and then beginning to optimize what works, right? Really looking through, the areas that were successful in optimizing those pieces, and then ultimately begin to test new influencers and new platforms for influencer marketing. And then you can start working with your corporate partners to see how you can build corporate partnerships and corporate opportunities around marketing to use influencer marketing as well, right? So I think that's like the winning trifecta. You can bring in your mission, corporate partners that are aligned already or could be aligned, and influencers that are also aligned. You can build some really impactful campaign opportunities and to really scale your mission through influencer marketing. So I said a lot and I said it fast, but let's put a pause in here now and open it up for Q&A. If there's any questions to review about influencer marketing. I do know. So one of the big questions that I hear all the time or get asked all the time is, influencer marketing sounds great, but seems expensive. And how do I do that with little to no budget? So there are usually 4 ways that influencer marketing can be funded. 2 of them are free. 2 of them are discounted. So, the first one is, again, if you've done your research, you've done your diligence in thinking about or thinking through what a campaign could or should look like, and you start reaching out to influencers, because the campaign is so well articulated, and if you found an influencer that is vision and value aligned with who you are and what you do, asking for one donated post is highly likely to be successful because you've done your research, because you've done your homework, and because you've asked them in a much more sort of professional way. You can get a post donated, which I think is important, and I think you can do that. The second thing is bartering, right? So maybe you have some merchandise or some apparel that either is that you have for your mission, maybe that you're about to do for an event you're having, maybe a walk or a gala, maybe it has a t-shirt or something else, or you have a corporate partner that is donated some in-kind apparel or merchandise that you could give to an influencer to do a post about, sort of in trade. You can send them gear, apparel, merch, and they'll do a post for you. So you can barter that way, no cash out of pocket, but you can barter and trade these things with an influencer, again, with the same strategy of outreach and communicating what you're hoping to do with them. And the likelihood of them to do a campaign with you is pretty high. So those are the two sort of free ways to do it. The third way is through corporate partnership. So obviously, for-profit businesses are using influencer marketing all the time. Most consumer-facing brands are heavily, actively investing in influencer marketing, and so we find that influencer marketing that has some sort of impact messaging, either in entirety or in somewhat, along with a product, makes the performance of that campaign significantly better in comparison than just a straight-ahead product campaign. So there's opportunities for corporate partners to either subsidize most of or completely subsidize an influencer marketing campaign that would align maybe their product and an influencer with your mission. And so I think there's definitely a way for you to leverage a corporate partner to help in funding that. And then obviously the fourth one is ultimately paying with an influencer, from a marketing budget. You can, I have found that there is a market rate for your influencers that you work with, and there's also a nonprofit discounted rate. So I think that if you've done your homework and your research and have done outreach and are talking to influencers that are vision and value aligned with who you are and what you do, then the likelihood of them be able to give you a discount is pretty high. So those are kind of my four areas of how you can potentially fund it. Another question here was, can any nonprofit use influencer marketing, or does it depend on the mission? So generally speaking, every nonprofit anywhere can use influencer marketing. I think that depending the mission of the nonprofit, sort of there are levels of interest and there are levels of audience participation, there are levels of influencer participation. And so depending on the mission, some of that may be smaller than others. But philosophically, every nonprofit can and should look into influencer marketing because of all the great work that everybody does. And influencers as a group, they want to do good. They want to leverage their platform to create some positive impact. So ultimately, as a broad statement, influencer marketing can and will work for any mission. It will just vary on the types of missions that you have. I mean, obviously, the golden three of marketing is babies, kittens, and puppies, right? So obviously, they're like anything related to animals is very popular. Anything related to kids is very, very popular, just as a general marketing statement. But that doesn't necessarily preclude environmental causes, which are important, or elderly care or health, which is super important, or literacy, or many of the other topics and missions that are out there that I know I've missed a million of them. But yes, any nonprofit can use it. Just really depends on the scale. Opportunity depends on the type of mission that they do. If a nonprofit has money set aside in their budget to work with a company like ours, what is the benefit of working with us versus approaching influencers directly? And what's the typical return on investment when we're working with a firm like yours? So a couple of things. In terms of the value of working with a partner like us or an agency or anything like that, I think one is that the ability to have access to influencers, to understand how to find them, to make sure the campaign is set up, negotiated, measured, sort of all of the core pieces that I work through. I think when you work with any outside vendor or any third party, That's really the big benefit of working with us or an agency. I think just to kind of talk about us specifically, there are few nonprofits, excuse me, there are few agencies. I actually don't know of any that have done influencer marketing for nonprofits in a nuanced way like we do. I think most agencies who do nonprofit marketing and have tried to do influencer marketing on top sort of treat it like for-profit influencer marketing, where you're kind of just trying to find an influencer to tout a product that sort of aligns with their audience. But there are so much different nuances along the way to ensure that you're working with the right influencer to drive the right outcome, because ultimately it depends on the goal. I mean, return on investment, it depends on the goal, right? So like if you are looking for an awareness campaign or engagement campaign, those returns are significantly different and measured differently than if you were to do a straight ahead donation campaign. And that range, that the donation campaigns or the sales campaigns range significantly with influencer marketing too. But I've seen anywhere from 2-to-1 to all the way up to like 5-to-1 or even higher. I mean, especially during the pandemic, video game streamers or esports streamers did a ton of donation or charity streams and charity work around their content and their posts, and generated millions and millions of dollars. That's sort of an edge case, but it does show you that with the right partners and the right causes and missions and communication style, you can generate a decent amount of money. So I think a good mix between, nonprofit or influencer partners that will donate a post, influencer partners where you can allocate some budget and pay for them, and working with corporate partners, like that mix really helps you as an organization sort of mitigate any potential, cost or return on investment pieces, because you have, varying funding opportunities around influencer marketing. Is it common for NFPSs to donate a post? So yeah, I mean, I see it all the time, where these influencers will donate posts. It all depends on how you approach them. Like I said, they are getting hit in their direct messages and in their emails. Though most of them don't use email anymore because it's a generational thing. But on their direct messages on social media, they're getting hit up all the time to do things for free or in some flavor of free. But if you can approach them in a very targeted way and be very communicative about why you're approaching them, how you see them adding value, and what you need from them, you are much more likely, and their vision and value aligned to your mission, you're in a much better position to ask for a donated post, as opposed to if you just ask them for something for free straight up. How do you get around the gatekeeper? So the influencer marketing space is now seeing a flood of agents. Like there are just now agents that manage all sizes of influencers. And so you got to kind of work with them. The first step though, always, is not to go to an agency or into an agent directly, but first go to the influencer directly, right? So really try to get them to answer a direct message on social media. That, to me, when we talk about gatekeepers in this frame of context, the gatekeeper is always the platform, and understanding which platform that influencer uses primarily to communicate. And it varies. Some influencers only communicate on Twitter. Some influencers only communicate via email. Some only, communicate via their direct message on Instagram. So I think that's probably one of the most important things in terms of finding how and who to talk to, is figuring out which platform to do outreach to, and go from there. And then ultimately it's up to that influencer to either advise their agent that they're going to do something for free, or not, or they're going to do something, but they'll do it at a discount, and then you'll work through the agent for that. But I think I have found that 9 times out of 10, maybe 10 times out of 10, that if your approach is like this, where it is communicated in an articulate way of who you are, why you think they would be valuable, and how you want them to participate, that you will get past any initial issue around gatekeepers, any issue around not being able to have them respond, and then work with them and figuring out how they fit. And again, that could be a donated post, that could be a bartered post where you send them a Make-A-Wish t-shirt, or a corporate somebody who donated in kind, something you can send to them. It could be a corporate partnership which they love, or it could just be a straight ahead engagement where you're paying out of a marketing budget. So that's what we see around the gatekeepers. So the best way to reach me and us, so we're Kaleidoscope.io. It's kaleidoscope.io spelled that way. My email is nick@kaleidoscope.io. We have built a platform that does lots of things around technology solutions for social media, influencer marketing. And so we've done, we've raised several $1 million. We've helped nonprofits reach about 20 million or so people over the last couple of years. And so we're scaling often and early, and excited about being in this space, because again, this is obviously self-serving, but we believe that the future of mission-driven communication will be on social media in partnership with influencers. And so the sooner we can get the space comfortable with talking about influencers, talking to influencers, figuring out ways to approach them in meaningful ways, then I think that the whole space can grow in a really short period of time. And that's it. Any other questions before I let you guys go for the rest of the day? Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.